Good morning, Green Spring. Today is Wednesday, September 20th. I just said the doctor is back, and that's because clearly it's not summer anymore. Good morning, Dr. Sethi. Good to see you. And today we are going to talk about something that sounds complicated, but you hear it more and more often. We call this session the what you don't know about your gut, what you may not know about your gut. So what is all that?
So it's about the microbiome.
Yeah, that's that word, right?
Yes,
yeah.
that is that word. And if I were giving a talk in a classroom, I would ask for a show of hands about who's heard about the microbiome. And should it matter? That's the real question.
Yeah. I think that a lot of people have heard the word because it's flying around in many places right now and in the media. Yes. But do people know what they hear? Right?
We hope that that's the case. That's a very positive way to look at it.
That's right.
Because you know what? The gut is the epicenter of our health. And I use that as an opening statement, actually, because I don't think we recognize it as such.
Right.
You know, we think of our gut principally, it makes us think about food.
Yes.
It makes us think about things that make us happy, and all of that is fine.
And I don't think that much about the gut as long as it functions. Yeah. You know, food comes in and then
yes.
food goes out, or
yes.
whatever is left over goes
yes.
out. And
yes.
why think about it?
Yeah, but it is imperative that we think about our gut. We think about our heart all the time. Everybody knows a cardiologist around or somebody who sees a gastroenterologist. Do you need to see somebody about your gut microbiome? The answer is no, because you know what? You have more control than you could possibly imagine. If you're looking for autonomy, think that you can influence your gut. And you influence it by what you eat. That's overly simplistic to say. It's just what we eat. It's our environment. It's, you know, what our genetic makeup is. So it's more complex than just simply what we eat.
But that's the part we can control.
That is correct.
Yeah.
That is the part that we can control.
Mm-hmm.
So why does the microbiome matter, and what exactly is it? I think is the question. And there are a few things that we should know about that. So the microbiome is in the gut, because we're talking about the gut, but we'll touch on some other areas as well, is the bacteria that live in our gut. The microbiota.
Millions and millions, right?
They're in the trillions.
Wow.
Yeah. So when we want to think about high numbers, we don't have to just think about the national debt. We
can produce it all ourselves.
All ourselves. It's all there.
And I understand that there are different microbiota in the body, right?
Yes.
And we are specifically talking about the gut.
We are, but I think, again, it's good to mention up front that the gut is not the only part of our body that has the microbiota. And I should hastily identify that when we talk about microbiota, it includes the infamous COVID virus and all the other viruses that exist in our universe, and many that we don't know about. Predominantly, we don't know about them. Bacteria, fungus, protozoa. So it's the whole spectrum of microbiota that can cause inflammation and infection. And
they also must do something good.
Yes, of course they do. And in fact, every organ system in our body, or many parts of our body, have a microbiome that is unique to each person. So when we talk about, each person being different, they are, because the microbiome is different. Yeah.
Okay.
So the gut happens to have the largest share of it, and is the major determinant of disease. So, and I'm going to take another quantum leap because I'm trying to make this relevant rather than abstract. We all heard through COVID that some individuals may never get COVID.
Right.
whereas others are very susceptible. And those who were at higher risk usually had some features, clinical features that were unique to them. Very young, much older, having cancer or other kinds of immunosuppressive disorders were at greater risk. If you had certain pre-existing diseases, you were at greater risk. But some individuals just never got COVID. And why did they not get COVID? We don't exactly know, but there could be some genetic basis, but also that their microbiome is different. We said at the beginning, each individual's microbiome is different.
Yeah.
So how come it's so different? It is different because we eat differently. You eat differently than what I eat, than what we may have eaten, let's say, 30 years ago. 30 years ago, the American diet was meat and potatoes, and I still occasionally have people tell me that's what I really like.
Right.
And when they say meat and potatoes, they're talking about beef. They're not talking about chicken or fish.
Right, right.
So it was meat and
And 50
potatoes.
years ago, the vegetables were all canned.
Correct.
For the most part.
Yes, of course. And so we have countless, I think that's the better way to put it, rather than try to cap it with a number of bacteria in our gut. So we've got, as you might imagine, as is true of the rest of the world, we've got the good and the not so good.
Yeah.
But mostly they're working symbiotically and helping to preserve balance. And just like everything else, when the balance is tipped and we've got more harmful bacteria than good bacteria, problems occur. Yeah, we become sick. We may have actual infections. And there are things which include food and how foods are broken down and what kind of a pH we have in our system that determines if or not we get an infection. So even though we're talking about the gut, I just want to make this point because we're going to come to this momentarily, that bacteria, by far and large, don't like an acidic pH in terms of our own microbiome. They do not grow and flourish. The bad bacteria don't flourish in an acidic pH. And so much as we talk about acidic foods, we are referring to acidity in the stomach. We're not referring to acidity in the rest of the gut. So some of the foods we eat cause a lower pH in our gut, which is useful because it keeps the harmful bacteria at bay. And we can tip that balance. So, for instance, when we give antibiotics for an infection, it doesn't matter where the infection is. It has the potential to alter the bacteria in the gut. And those who regrettably may have had this problem may have had an infection called C. diff. Everybody's probably heard of C. diff as one of the nasty bacteria. So C. diff is there, but it only becomes overwhelming and overtakes the good bacteria when we give antibiotics because it changes that balance. So when we say something is good or bad, it's not necessarily good or bad, but it depends on the circumstances.
Yes.
So not to mistake the acidity of the stomach when we eat acidic foods with what is happening in the gut. So what we eat becomes such an important part of what happens to the bacteria. Now, this still sounds very abstract, that the bacteria get altered, so we get a few infections. But more and more, we are beginning to recognize that in some disorders, some autoimmune disorders, and we don't know what causes them, so for instance, multiple sclerosis, even in diabetes, that there may be alterations in the gut microbiome that play a role in the disease. It may not necessarily be cause and effect. We can't say that about any disease we know other than the C. diff we just spoke about and a few others. We can't say it's a direct cause and effect, but we can say that they may be responsible for some of the causation of disease.
So does that lead us to be able to say, and this can you do to change it?
Yes, we can definitely do that. But before we go there, I want to give you some additional background. So if this is so important, how come it has taken us this long to even think about the microbiome and get the public to understand that. So the microbiome is not as new as we think it is. It was probably around in the 20th century and was mentioned in some works, but we didn't recognize it as such. But the word really did come into being in the 1990s. And NIH sponsored, along with the Human Genome Project, the Human Microbiome Project.
Oh, really?
Yes, yes. And so a lot of work has been done, but we still have a long way to go. So rather than focusing on what we don't know, as per the question you asked, what can we do about it? So let's talk about some of the foods, you know. Why are some people more healthy than others? Is their diet exactly the same as the other people, or is there something different about them, right? And so the foods we eat matter. So if we look at the meat and potatoes diet, and we compare it with the diets today, even at Green Spring, and I don't profess to be any kind, to be more knowledgeable about it. You're much more knowledgeable about it than I am. So there's a variety of animal proteins that are available and non-animal proteins or vegetable proteins.
That's right.
There's a lot of newer foods that we haven't been much engaged with. So for instance, when we look at the fermented foods, and there's a lot of them, right?
Forever we've known sauerkraut.
Yes, one of my favorite Reuben sandwiches, which I don't eat anymore because I'm eating plant-based, but nevertheless, the sauerkraut is in that category. And now if you go to the grocery stores, you'll see there's a lot of kombucha.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
There's kefir, there's tempeh, so there's a lot of fermented foods out there. Anything that's pickled. So when you think of pickles, think how pickles are made, right? So you're going
acidity.
You're going to put vinegar in there. So even your bread and butter pickles, just any kind of pickles. Anything that is fermented is actually good. And so why are these fermented foods so good? I've put these ahead of our routine vegetables because it's such an important focus.
Yeah.
Because it requires a great deal of us. First, we have to know that they are there. Second, many of them we are not familiar with, and so you have to develop a taste for it. My position on that is nobody was born drinking alcohol, but many have acquired a taste for it. So you can acquire a taste for whatever you wish to acquire a taste for, right?
Right.
And so we have to A, know about them, and B, think about including them in our diet in any way that we can.
I find you have to really train yourself.
You do.
You know, because when you first start eating something new that you're not familiar with, might as well never eat it again.
I know.
But then when you do it over and over, suddenly you like it.
Yes. So clearly, the younger generation is having an easier time with it.
Yeah.
And many years ago, when my son went to his first TED meeting in Vancouver, he told me just about the only drinks there were kombucha.
Wow.
And he'd never drunk a kombucha before that.
Uh-huh.
And it takes a while, but you get used to it much easier. It's like anything else. You can acquire a taste for it. So the reason these particular foods are so good is because they cause the production of what are called short-chain fatty acids.
Right.
Now we're getting a little technical here, but these short-chain fatty acids are particularly good in keeping a good microbiome healthy. And you don't have to drink huge amounts. It's not you have to drink a 5-ounce glass of wine. You can drink a small amount and progressively improve your taste. But if you don't like fermented foods, let's say you're one of those who says, I can't eat that. Even yogurt is too tart for me. I'm never going to eat it. There's still hope because there's many vegetables out there and fruits out there that
I was just going to say, we talked before the show how we've both find several fruit just quite tart.
Yes, yes.
So that would work too?
That's good too.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good too. Mm-hmm. So
what are the vegetables that you were thinking of?
Amongst the fruits, let's just talk about the fruits just for a moment, if we may. So amongst the fruits, we've now elevated blueberries to be amongst the best in terms of their potential to improve our gut. I should mention one thing, and that is that when we take iron, we know that the color of the stool changes, and that's something people are always alert to. But also remember that blueberries can do the same thing. So I've had occasionally people come to me just for that problem, and when I ask them about blueberries, they look at me like, how could you possibly know that I'm eating blueberries? And sometimes they are, but sometimes they're not, but just something to be alert to. So amongst the fruits, the blueberries are on top, but all your berry type of fruits are very good for us. Amongst the vegetables, we've got a whole slew of vegetables that are very good for us. I'm sure we've talked about this before, but the cruciferous vegetables are very good for us.
Now, are we still talking about acidity or other things that they bring to us?
No, we're not talking about acidity.
Okay.
But yeah, that's why I, put that up front so that we would understand the value of fermented foods. But these vegetables are also very good for our gut. And the king or queen of these vegetables is broccoli. And broccoli is being studied. In fact, there are many labs around the country that are studying broccoli extract because they're so impressed by it. The other cruciferous vegetables that are very good for us, other than broccoli, of course, think of it.
Collards and kale.
Brussels sprouts.
Yes.
Much maligned Brussels sprouts.
Well, I think people are overcoming that now, that they're not cooked to death anymore like some years ago.
They have to be fresh.
Yeah.
So Brussels sprouts and cauliflower tend to develop that odor when they're not so fresh.
Yeah, cabbage here.
And cabbage too. But these are all the super vegetables, if you would.
Okay.
So worth keeping in mind. So now you just mentioned a key word. You said Brussels sprouts are not being cooked to death.
Right.
So the biological value of the vegetables is far greater when they're raw. Raw asparagus assumes a totally different note when it comes to our health than if it's cooked. So there are many vegetables that almost all vegetables fall into that category. We do better with the fruits because usually we're not cooking them unless we're, putting them into pies and cobblers. But the vegetables can easily be eaten raw. And there's so many of them. And now
I think the other good thing, sorry to interrupt you, when you eat vegetables raw, you really have to chew.
That's correct.
And that's where it starts, right?
Yeah, all along the way. And they're also very good for you for other reasons, which we don't know the interaction, let's say, between a common problem for the demographic here, which is constipation, and the microbiome. But we do know that transit becomes slow as we get older, and the vegetables help to improve the transit. And so if you eat a diet high in fiber, that's very good for you. So a lot of the fruits and vegetables have probiotic potential. So if you're talking about the microbiome, it's reasonable to think, hey, the probiotics should be helpful. And they are. So let's take a moment to talk about the two sources of probiotics. So they can come as supplements. You can buy them over the counter, or they can come in natural foods. It doesn't take much to say that natural foods would be better than would be the supplements.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. So I want to tell you quickly why the natural foods are better than the supplements. Supplements are unregulated. And I learned to my surprise, even I didn't know this till yesterday. They are not required by law to be accurate in what they list as ingredients. When they tell you there's so many live cultures, they may not be. And they don't have to be accurate. There's no requirement to be accurate. So even though the probiotic says active cultures, they may not be active.
And I understand that some probiotic pills have a lot of binders and useless stuff.
They do. So probiotics in the minds of many people who work in this field, many scientists, is that unless you're on an antibiotic, probiotics may not play a role. We can't be certain of that, but the probiotic foods should certainly receive our attention. Amongst the most well-known probiotic food, of course, is yogurt.
Yes.
And if you look at the country Georgia, not the state Georgia, and many in that part of the world, their diet is heavily dependent on yogurt.
Right.
And they live long, healthy lives. I'm just not talking about lifespan, but I'm talking about healthy lives.
Yes.
So that is certainly something that we should consider. Now, in the interest of time, let's just move from probiotics. Go ahead, you have a question?
Well, I had a question because maybe you can briefly explain the difference between probiotic and prebiotic.
Well, that's where I was going.
Well, ta-da.
I was going to move quickly to prebiotics.
Yes.
So probiotics, the pills may or may not be of any value. If you're on an antibiotic, yes, but too many people take too many probiotic pills. And I would recommend moving away from them and going to the more natural foods, such as the ones we discussed, the cruciferous vegetables, fruits and vegetables, berries, all of that. So what about the prebiotic foods? How do the prebiotic foods fit in? So the prebiotic foods are your resistant starches. I've heard sometimes people say there's too many starches being served in the food.
Resistant to what?
So the resistant starches don't break down in the small bowel. They tend to break down in the large bowel. And they actually are converted into the short-chain fatty acids.
That was mentioned earlier by you as something good.
Yes, that's something good. So there is the linkage. And then I keep coming back to constipation because in my own mind, I'm intrigued by the fact that there may be more linkages than we've ever recognized. So what are the resistant starches? The resistant starches are all the fiber, anything that is high in fiber.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
Oatmeal, whole grains, not whole wheat bread because that's majority, just this, that, and the other.
Yeah, and highly processed.
Yeah, highly processed. Anything that's processed does not work. So the prebiotic foods, so the resistant starches, the whole grains are very good. Now, we recommend a high fiber whole grain diet for those who have constipation too. So we may be doing more than just improving transit time. We may actually be doing something to the microbiome that we don't yet recognize. Some people have a great deal of trouble with it, some don't. What do we tell them to do? Drink a lot of water, eat more fiber. So then what do? We go buy fiber at the store. So rather than buying fiber at the store, it would be good to eat the fiber. So when we introduce a lot of fiber, it should be done gently, and you should gently improve the amount that you eat. Because if you eat too much, it's going to make you feel
just make it worse
very
for a while.
gassy for a while, and nobody wants that to happen. So, the microbiome, I think, becomes so interesting because it sort of makes us go back to nature,
Yeah.
Eating the raw foods, eating the fruits and vegetables, and and the fiber, and we don't get into a lot of the animal protein that we believe has been important for our good health. There's no reason necessarily to believe that, but that's subject for another discussion.
Okay, yes.
But this is a full circle. Eating natural foods, which are high in probiotics, eating foods which are prebiotic, are all helpful to our gut because our gut ultimately determines what happens to our bodies, both in terms of inflammation and infection. We know well, some people get an infection, they get past it. Many people go to dinner, one gets sick and the rest don't, and they all eat the same food.
Yeah.
Ever wonder why? So it may all have, I'm not trying to be oversimplistic, not giving the gut more value, but
it seems it has quite a bit of value.
Yeah, it does. It really does.
Quite
and
an
so
important role.
we should be much more appreciative of the food that is served and make those healthy choices that help support our gut and our body. We recognize if our gut is malfunctioning very easily, but we should recognize that we can make our gut function even better, even better. And I'm going to end with a quote
and by
from
going back
Hippocrates.
to natural ways rather than buying more pills and dissolving them in water and
Absolutely.
eating bad first and then adding that is not the solution.
And the gut, in addition to digestion, it's implicit now, helps our immunity, helps to regulate our immune response, and it also makes important vitamins. So the quote from Hippocrates, and I'm going to read this. Let food be thy medicine. Let food be thy medicine, and medicine thy food.
Yeah. Yeah, wise words. Spoken
and they've stood the test of time.
Ago and still true.
They've stood the test of time.
Yeah. Wow, that was a whole lot of information and maybe a new perspective on new appreciation for your gut and what we can do to continue make it work.
Yep.
Thank you so much. I hope you got all that.